The BBC, the British Brainwashing Corporation, the mouthpiece of the state. For decades, the British Brainwashing Corporation, BBC, has masqueraded as a beacon of truth and integrity, selling itself as the gold standard of journalism. In reality, it is nothing more than a state-controlled propaganda machine, peddling lies, suppressing dissent, and manufacturing fear to serve the interests of the ruling class. Funded by an extortionate TV licence fee, which the government forces people to pay under the threat of fines and imprisonment, the BBC is nothing short of a taxpayer-funded weapon used to manipulate public opinion. Beneath its polished facade lies a cesspit of corruption, scandal, and outright depravity. Let's rip away the mask and expose the BBC for what it truly is: a state-sponsored propaganda outlet, complicit in cover-ups, deception, and the destruction of free thought. The BBC has never been about honest reporting. It has always been an instrument of control, tasked with shaping public perception in favour of the establishment. Time and time again, it has been caught manipulating facts, silencing dissent, and pushing government-backed narratives while demonising anyone who dares question them. The BBC thrives on fear-mongering, its most effective tool for keeping the masses obedient. Whether it's pandemics, terrorism, or climate hysteria, the corporation is a master of cranking up public anxiety to justify government overreach. COVID-19 fear machine. The BBC played a pivotal role in spreading mass hysteria during the pandemic, using exaggerated death tolls, cherry-picked statistics, and Orwellian rhetoric to coerce the public into compliance. It shamed those who questioned lockdowns, censored experts who disagreed with government policy, and propagated the myth that questioning the official narrative was dangerous misinformation. War propaganda from the Iraq War to Ukraine, the BBC has been nothing but a mouthpiece for military-industrial lies. It sold the fake weapons of mass destruction narrative, justifying the illegal invasion of Iraq, leading to the deaths of millions. Today, it parrots NATO war propaganda without question, whipping up support for endless conflicts. Climate alarmism. The BBC uncritically pushes the climate agenda, acting as the state's fear machine, to justify higher taxes, restrictions on personal freedom, and complete financial control via carbon credit systems. It never presents the other side of the argument. Only the doomsday scenario needed to keep the population panicked. The BBC has a long history of covering up crimes, protecting the powerful and burying the truth. Let's look at some of the most egregious cases. Jimmy Savile, the BBC's crown jewel of depravity. Perhaps the most damning scandal of all, Jimmy Savile, a serial paedophile, was not only protected but actively enabled by the BBC for decades. Savile, a long-time BBC presenter, had access to hospitals, children's homes, and even mortuaries, where he committed unspeakable acts against vulnerable children and adults. Multiple BBC employees knew about his abuse, but chose to cover it up. Even after his death, the BBC tried to suppress the truth, pulling a Newsnight investigation that would have exposed his crimes. The only reason this scandal finally broke was because independent journalists wouldn't let it die. The BBC, left with no choice, finally pretended to investigate, while throwing a few token figures under the bus. But make no mistake, the BBC is guilty of aiding and abetting one of Britain's worst paedophiles. The Westminster paedophile ring and Elm Guesthouse scandal. Savile was not an isolated case. He was part of a much larger network of paedophiles operating within the British establishment. High-ranking MPs, intelligence officials, and media figures were all allegedly involved in the Westminster paedophile ring, which centred around Elm Guesthouse. The BBC's role? silencing whistleblowers, dismissing victims as conspiracy theorists, burying any attempts at serious investigation. Even when former detective Mark Williams Thomas uncovered credible evidence of powerful figures involved in child abuse, the BBC refused to run the story. The BBC's dirty ties to MI5 and intelligence agencies. The BBC's newsroom isn't just biased, it is actively infiltrated by MI5 and other intelligence operatives. This is not speculation, it is a documented fact. In the 1980s, it was revealed that MI5 had an office inside the BBC, screening journalists for ideological purity. The BBC has routinely acted as a government mouthpiece, feeding the public pre-approved state narratives while censoring dissenting voices. During the Brexit campaign, the BBC was caught systematically promoting Remain while demonising Leave supporters. Even now, it ridicules anyone who dares challenge the EU's influence. Unlike private broadcasters that must earn their income through voluntary viewership, the BBC forcibly extracts wealth from the public through the licence fee. This is nothing short of state-sanctioned extortion. Refuse to pay? You face fines, court summons, and even prison time. The BBC generates billions in revenue yet still demands government handouts. Overpaid executives and celebrity presenters live in obscene luxury, while the public is forced to fund their propaganda. Why should people be forced to pay for a network that covers up paedophilia, suppresses free speech, pushes government lies, promotes woke ideology while mocking British values? The British Brainwashing Corporation has spent decades manipulating minds, spreading fear and covering up corruption. It is not a news organisation, it is a government propaganda agency designed to keep the population compliant. The truth is out there, but you won't find it on the BBC. You'll find it in independent media, alternative journalism, and the voices the BBC tries to silence. It's time to starve the beast. Cancel your licence fee, boycott their content, and expose their web of lies. The BBC is not an institution of truth. It is a state-funded brainwashing operation that must be dismantled. The sooner we wake up to the BBC's corruption, the sooner we can break free from the chains of government propaganda.